Hello all, this is Halloween, and if you love haunted history and cemeteries as much as I do, you may want to subscribe because I'm going to be taking you somewhere new every week. In today's episode, we're headed to Palmetto, Florida to visit the Old Palmetto Cemetery, also known as the Yellow Fever Cemetery. Enjoy! We're here at the Catcher's Net in Palmetto, Florida. Gonna go in and get a bite to eat. We're here at the Old Palmetto Cemetery. This cemetery was established in 1888 and also known as the Yellow Fever Cemetery. Let's go in and see what we can see. I wanted to read this little historic marker real quick. It says Palmetto Cemetery. The Old Palmetto Cemetery was established prior to 1888 and was used until 1910. So it says it was established prior to 1888. They probably don't know the exact dates because this is a yellow fever cemetery, which means that they were dumping bodies here, probably in mass graves during the time of yellow fever, which spread through the eastern part of the United States, mostly in eastern seaports from 1793 up until 1905. So prior to it having marked memorials, this was probably just a dumping grounds for bodies. Because undertakers were so terrified, they didn't know how the disease spread, so they were basically just wrapping people in shrouds and burying them in mass graves at this time. Anyways, proceeding. The cemetery comprises 1 acre of land donated by Samuel Sparks Lamb, that's him right there, recognized founder of Palmetto. It's known as the Yellow Fever Cemetery because of the internment of victims of the epidemic of 1888. Some were original settlers. There are 44 original marked grave sites located here and an unknown number of unmarked graves. The graveyard was renovated in 1984 through the efforts of the Palmetto Historic Commission and the City of Palmetto, and again in 2016 with grant funding through the Florida Department of State Division of Historical Resources. Let's go in. It's a small cemetery, only 54 marked memorials here. It's not really a main road, it's more of a neighborhood. It's in the middle of a neighborhood. So it's not as bad as a main road. But there's a really cool house over there. Very, very cool. almost like a Spanish looking style of home right across from the cemetery here. It's a cute neighborhood. And look at all these beautiful trees. I think cemetery trees are my favorite. They're always cool looking. Peter Stewart Harley, September 26, 1888 to April 15th, 1896. These over here are really cool. I love this style. You'll see this style a lot in St. Augustine and a lot of the historic cemeteries. You will see this style. I just think it's really neat. These are, looks like there's a fresh arrangement of flowers here. Not fresh anymore so much, but someone's been by in the last couple months and put flowers here. I think these are marked though. They're not marked. Oh, here's one marker. John M. Lowry. Thomasville, Georgia, Guards, CSA. Pretty cool. Now, I mentioned this being a yellow fever cemetery, and those were all up the eastern coastline of the United States. Thousands of people were dying. Every summer, people would die, and nobody knew where the disease was coming from. And that is why the victims of the yellow fever epidemic would be buried in these mass graves. There are a lot in Georgia, there's a lot in the Carolinas. I think for some reason the activity was just heavier there. It lasted for over 100 years, this virus. And it was flu-like symptoms. People would get fever. Sometimes they would be bleeding internally, organ failure, and all of this were symptoms of this disease. So all of these cemeteries that are considered yellow fever cemeteries have these mass graves in them because, like I said, the undertakers were terrified of getting the disease themselves. They didn't know if it was transferable from person to person. They didn't know till later. They found out Dr. John P. Wall of Tampa was the doctor that discovered that insects were carrying the virus. At that time, they also learned that the virus was not transferable from person to person, and thereafter, so that was in 1873, people would receive a proper burial. But for over 100 years, they were buried in these mass graves because people were terrified of contracting the virus themselves. I mean, I guess, which is understandable of the time. But if you go to the Circular Church Graveyard in Charleston, that is a yellow fever cemetery. There's a wide open area in that graveyard with no memorials at all, but you're actually standing upon where people were buried at that time. So you were only able to contract yellow fever through the bite of a mosquito. This is a Sarah M. wife of Green B. Bush, born September 1849, died in 1907. There had to have been a recent decorating of this cemetery because there are a lot of flower arrangements here that look kind of fresh. I mean, they're fresh flowers, but they've died since. But it's the same arrangement. So they must have had a decorating day here recently where they came and left flowers on the memorials of the departed here. So that's really neat. But I'm seeing them at pretty much almost every memorial. There's one here. The This is the Currys. James H. Curry and Elizabeth Whiting Curry. Passed in 1903. Passed in 1905. 1905 was actually the year that the yellow fever epidemic ended. Looks here like there might be something that got covered up here. So it looks to be embedded into the ground. Like a crypt or something. And we have a sort of obelisk kind of monument here. Addison Bradford Glover, passed in 1906. Look how pretty it is here. It's so pretty. Grounds are so well kept, and these trees are just gorgeous. I don't know why it is, but cemetery trees, I mean, they're so big and so old and nobody messes with them, and I guess they're just able to bask in all their glory for hundreds of years, because look at this one here. It's got a bit of a growth here on the side, but it looks kind of cool. Like a big old knot in the tree. It's very neat. These are big, sturdy trees that have probably been here for hundreds of years. At least a couple hundred that we know of, right? J.J. Wimbish. I don't really know what all of these military abbreviations mean, but I think this is military. It's CO period I 5th ALA REG CSA. Maybe I should learn what all of them mean. My husband was in the military for 20 years. I know some of them. There's a Randall H, that's what I call my husband. Harley is a common name in this cemetery, so the Harleys might have been some of the first settlers here in this area. This one here is hard to see. It's so covered in the bushes. But I'm trying to get there so I can see. Huh. Magnolia M. Her name was Magnolia? Wife of Joseph Cargia, born 1847, died in 1885. This is in a little sort of just blocked off section here. But there's all these palms growing out of it. I'm sitting here and kind of wondering if this is a piece of the original cemetery gate, because it's here in the ground, right? And it looks like it had a place where it looks like it would lock or whatever. It's very old looking. There's parts of it that have been corroded, and there's parts that are still in the ground here. And there's another piece of it over here. I bet that's the original cemetery gate. Obviously, the one where I did my intro is not old. It's rather new. So this is probably the original cemetery gate. It may not be placed in the same spot. It may just be something that the cemetery, since it's historic, decided to hold on to. And so they remounted them into the ground in various places, because they're kind of, you know, just in different places. There's a piece of it over there. There's a piece of it over there, and there's a piece of it over here. So obviously that's not the perimeter of what the cemetery would have originally been. But I still think it's kind of neat. You know, it's like seeing pieces of a shipwreck almost from that long ago. It's just really cool. Not sure if I mentioned, it might have been on the historic marker up here, but they stopped burials in this cemetery in 1910. So every memorial you see here is going to be that old, 100 years old or more. So that's what makes this one really special. I just think, and it being so well kept, and people actually still coming and leaving flowers. I mean, that's pretty awesome. It's pretty awesome. So many times you see these old historic cemeteries that are just neglected and people don't care anymore, you know? We've just about seen the whole cemetery here. You can tell that some of these memorials are probably not where they were originally, but they have been placed in another spot. They didn't just throw them away, or they're not just laying in a stack by a tree. You know, they kind of tried to place them somewhere. But that's it. That's the whole cemetery. 54 marked memorials, established in 1888, burials till 1910. Says established online in 1888, but obviously prior to 1888 they were burying here. This one could go back as far as the late 1700s, as far as we know. I would put my guess there, since they do have yellow fever burials here. I would think late 1700s, early 1800s is how far back this cemetery goes. So certainly one of the oldest in Florida, and definitely worth a visit. We're headed out of the cemetery now. We're gonna go check out another one right down the road here. The Catcher's Net had a great atmosphere. Beautiful, you could sit right on the water. I loved the atmosphere, but unfortunately the food just came short of being awesome. It wasn't as good as we thought it was going to be, but the staff was amazing. And I think they're fairly new. They just came under new ownership. So I think they have a little bit of work to do as far as the food goes. They're probably still trying out new things and stuff like that. I would definitely give them a try. Maybe just don't order the nachos or the shrimp po' boy. But they actually had a lot of stuff on the menu that was not seafood at all, which I was surprised about. Those items might be better to order. So, but anyway, it's just an honest review of what we had there. It wasn't horrible, but it wasn't necessarily great. Anyway, that does it for today's episode. I hope you loved it. If you haven't already, please remember to like, subscribe, and share the video. And I'll see you next time.